My brother is notorious. They have not been to prison, they have been imprisoned. A prison is not a place you enter, it is no place. My brothers are notorious. They do regular things like wait. On my birthday, they say my name. They will never forget that we are named. What is that memory? The days of our childhood together were steep steps into a collapsing mind. It looked like we rescued ourselves, were rescued. Then there are these days, each day of our adult lives. We will never forget our way through these brothers, each brother, my brother, my dearest brother's dear heart. Your hearts are broken. This is not a secret, although there are secrets, and as yet I do not understand how my own sorrow has turned into my brother's hearts. The hearts of my brothers are broken. If I knew another way to be, I would call up a brother. I would hear myself saying, my brother, my dearest brother's dear heart. On the tip of my tongue, one note following another is another path. Another dawn where the pink sky is the bloodshot of struck, of sleepless, of sorry, of senseless. Shush. Those years of and before me and my brothers, the years of passage, plantation, migration, of Jim Crow segregation, of poverty, inner cities, profiling of 1 in 3, 2 jobs, boy, hey boy, each a felony, accumulate into the hours inside our lives. When we are all caught, hanging, the rope inside us, the tree inside us, its roots, our limbs, our throats sliced through, and when we open our mouths to speak, blossoms, oh blossoms. No place coming out, brother, dear brother, that kind of blue. The sky is the silence of brothers, all the days leading up to my call. If I called, I'd say goodbye before I broke the goodbye. I say goodbye before anyone can hang up. Don't hang up. My brother hangs up, though he is here. I keep talking. The talk keeps him there. The sky is blue, kind of blue. The day is hot. Is it cold? Are you cold? It does get cool. Is it cool? Are you cool? My brother is completed by sky. The sky is his silence. Eventually, he says it is raining. It is raining down. It was raining. It stopped raining. It is raining down. He won't hang up. He's there. He's there. But he's hung up even though he is there. Goodbye, I say. I break the goodbye. I say goodbye before anyone can hang up. Don't hang up. Wait with me, though the waiting may be the call of goodbyes. It is a poem from a book published in 2014 called Citizen, an American Lyric. I want to begin today by sharing a story, and it is a story from my experience, but I want you to be very clear. I want to be very clear with you that this is not a story about how amazing I am. I'll save that for our private conversations. This is a story about the lessons of spirit, the lessons of learning and growing and maturing as a spiritual being in the work of radical love here in these United States. And it is a story that I want to share with you because the good news I want to share today is the good news that our faith and our capacity to have a loving impact in any moment of the day, any unexpected moment of the day, our capacity to have a loving impact is infinite, and most of the time, at least for me, unimaginable. So right after Michael Brown was assassinated in Ferguson about 10 years ago, I was serving a church in Philadelphia. I had been a student minister there. I was an intern there. I was asked to hire part-time to be co-minister and minister of social justice. And after the murder of Michael Brown, we knew in that congregation that something had changed. And I was fortunate because in that congregation had decades of, unusually for our congregations, it had probably 40% of people of color in the congregation and in leadership, and as I say, decades of leadership. The minister back in the 60s had joined Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma. There was a lot of networking and a lot of powerful work going on. And in the course of that work, I met a young woman, a young mother. We were seeking to bear witness, to listen to the stories of people in our neighborhood, which was primarily a neighborhood of color, but mixed. And she shared that just a few days before, she had not been to our church before, but I seem to recall maybe she came to the vigil. Her son, who was 13 or 14 at the time, had been waiting with a group of his friends on the basketball team. They were all going to play a game, and they all had matching hats because their moms had made hats for everyone on the team. They were excited about the game, and they were waiting at a subway stop in Philadelphia. And a group of police came towards them very, aggressively, and all the boys ran away except her son. And the police arrested him, beat him to the extent that he was hospitalized and will probably never be able to father children. They thought he was somebody who had committed a robbery several blocks away. And when his mother told us her story, he was still in the hospital. And she said to us and to me, she said, "I wish I had never taught him to respect the police and the law. I wish I had taught him to run away. Because if he'd run away, he wouldn't be in the hospital." And those words, I probably don't have to tell you how they struck me in my heart, of how different, just another way of hearing how different our life experiences are. And so we prayed with her and kept in touch, and at the time we were wearing bracelets. I think the UUA had made them, but I don't remember, and they said, "Black Lives Matter to Unitarian Universalists." And of course at my church we made these buttons, which you may or may not be able to see. And a few weeks later, again, a group of us were in court to be in solidarity with another young man with of developmental difficulties, older, an adult, who had been riding his bicycle the wrong way down a one-way street and had been, I guess captured is the right word, and beaten and sent to prison to await trial because there was no money for bail. And I walked into the courtroom along with folks from our group, and this first mom was there, and I sat next to her. And she was wearing the bracelet. And she took my hand, and she said, "Every time I look at this bracelet, I remember that there are people praying for me and people who care about me." Even repeating that to you fills me with a humility and a gratitude that I honestly can't describe. described, and I won't try because this isn't about me. But again, we don't know when the smallest thing can make a powerful impact. It didn't matter to me whether she was going to come to the church or not. It mattered to me that she was a human being that we could be with. I wanted to proclaim the good news of our faith that calls us into these places and these spaces in our world that may be different from our own experiences or may not, but that call us into honoring radical love and doing the work of our faith. A young Martin Luther King, at 25 years old, brought his wife, Coretta, who he met when she was a student at the Boston Conservatory. She was a gifted musician and singer on full scholarship. They came to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. And they came knowing that they could have gone to his father's church in Atlanta. He came from preaching royalty. He could have gone to his father's church and had an incredible career, but instead they came to Montgomery because they wanted to be engaged in the work of uplifting and organizing the communities they came from. And they came into the Montgomery bus boycott, which I know all of you have heard of. And not long after King, whose amazing sermons and amazing power to speak and to connect with people, and his leadership and his and Coretta's leadership in that movement, the death threats began. And the threats against his life, his family's life, and the incredibly horrible racist epithets you can imagine. And one night, he picked up the phone. Of course, you know, in the 50s, we have answering machines, and they were always afraid if they didn't pick up the phone, they might miss somebody who really needed them. He told his congregation he got 40 calls a day. They got 40 threatening calls a day. And he picked up the phone, and the man began with a racist insult and then said, "If you don't stop this and get out of town in 3 days, we're going to blow you up and your entire family." And King was afraid. And he went into their kitchen, Vinyl and Formica. I had a chance to visit there. And he made himself some coffee and he sat in a chair, and it was after midnight. And he prayed out loud. And he told the God he served, "I am afraid. I'm losing my courage." And he says he heard a voice inside of him say, "Martin Luther, stand up for justice. No matter what, stand up for justice." And he says that at that moment, the fear left him. And although the threats continued for the rest of his short life and certainly were responsible for ending his life, he did stand up for justice. A few days after that call, Coretta and their 10-month-old daughter and a friend were in the house, and somebody bombed the house. And if the adults had not heard footsteps and immediately run to the back of the house with the baby, they would have been killed. These tactics that we see today, that continue, are part of our history. King worked, as so many others have, to change that, to turn that around, but it is still with us. And then, after that moment, he rode that incredible high, the March on Washington, the speeches we know, the slogans we repeat, the things we remember, if not often, at least we remember them once a year, the incredible success of nonviolent protest and the incredible success, and when white America saw people in Selma Black people in Selma being basically gunned down with water guns and horses, and they said, this is intolerable, this has to stop. And change happened. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, he used the words from the song, "We Shall Overcome," and he declared victory. This will change centuries of injustice. This will change our society. And it was, in many ways, a great victory. And a year later, King and everybody in the Black community knew that nothing had changed. This was yet another law that was not being enforced. His donors, particularly his white donors, abandoned him. They said, "You're asking for too much. You should be happy with what's happened so far. You can't actually, if you keep asking for stuff, you're just going to alienate people." So they stopped giving him money. 70% of people in the United States opposed the things he stood for and fought for. 50% of folks in the Black community did not want to go further, according to what they said. And as I said earlier, he could have gone back and said, "Hey, keep giving me your money, or maybe find me a nice job somewhere." A lot of people do that, right? Where I can be safe, where my family won't be endangered every night. He didn't do that. He wrote a book, and he continued to speak. And in that book, which is entitled, "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" I wonder what you would say is the answer we'd give now. Everybody voting for chaos? Are we in chaos? No? Are we in community in the United States? Okay. All right, so nobody votes for community, one person votes for community, nobody votes for chaos. Well, I think you could argue for both. But I would also say to you that very little has changed. Very little has changed. Because if a young boy going to a basketball game can be mutilated for life, something has to change. If a man riding a bicycle down a one-way street gets incarcerated, something has to change. One man came up to us during one of our weekly vigils, and he said to us that he was practically crying. He said he'd been at a park and the little children were playing getting shot by the police. I'm not making this stuff up. How could I? I'm not that imaginative. So King wrote this book, and in this book he said, "I acknowledge that I made a mistake." He said, "I focused for so long, the movement, we focused so long on nonviolent protest. We didn't actually organize. We thought that changing the laws would make a difference, and now we're learning that maybe it doesn't." He talked about losing the support of tepid white allies. He came to the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly and delivered the Ware Lecture and said to our people, "Please stay awake during the revolution. This may be the last chance we have to avert chaos in our country." He talked about capitalism as the main problem. He said, "I'm a democratic socialist. Democracy by itself doesn't work because capitalism runs it." He talked about militarism. He talked about the role of the United States in the rest of the world. He even talked about Puerto Rico. laid out a framework that you and I could follow today. And in fact, many organizers, and I know many of you here, I don't think I'm saying anything that many of you haven't thought about or wrestled with. He talked about how the church has to continue to speak these things and be at the forefront of reminding us. And he said in this book that he was hopeful, and that he would always be hopeful, because he was animated by love, which is a powerful statement. And as you know, I should mention, that book and all of his books were published by Beacon House, one of the, Unitarian Universalist publishing houses. I have admired Dr. King. I followed him when I was a teenager and was inspired like so many others. I have admired him for what he accomplished all his life, his short life. But as I've gotten older, I admire his ability, that's the wrong word. I admire his commitment to continuing to do the work inside himself. And to admit, how many people do you know who are leaders, right? Actually admit mistakes. It's such a beautiful and humble thing. So with this, I return to the good news of our faith. Unitarian Universalism is in the best position it's been in maybe in all of its history. Continuing to work with communities, continuing to follow the leadership of those who are most impacted by the injustices we seek to change, and continuing to practice these things in our own relationships, working more collaboratively, less hierarchically, learning from our mistakes. And even if we don't go out marching, or don't go to hearings, or don't go, and I know many of us do, remembering that even wearing a button or a bracelet can be something that reminds me we're drawing a chalice in the dirt. That love changes us and changes others. Ashe, my beloveds, blessed be, and amen.